everyone once again to Inside the Pylon, a Midwest college football podcast. I am not joined by Clinton Boring tonight. Instead, I am joined. I guess we can call you a recurring guest star now, Sammy, since it's the third time you've been on here. Sammy Jacobs from Hoosier Huddle is joining us once again. This time to help us break down the Battle of Indiana, the rivalry renewed for the first time. What was this? It's 1991, 1990.
Yeah, 1991. And actually is the first game of that NBC contract for Notre Dame home games,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
this will be the first game at home at Notre Dame Stadium that is not on NBC.
So
So how
just a
about
whole
that for a bookend?
Yeah, a whole full circle moment. So I can officially say the second time in my lifetime that these two schools have met on the gridiron. Sammy, thank you again for making some time for us this evening, sir. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, getting ready. For winter break. We got winter break coming up on the job front, and then yeah, college football playoff. I mean, we talked about it in July with Curtis Rourke.
Mm-hmm.
He had two first place votes in the Heisman
Mm-hmm.
Heisman voting. So I don't know which one of us three, two of us three, had the Heisman votes. Um,
Oh, I
but
know it.
but yeah, man, what a journey it's been since July and August getting to the college football playoff.
Yeah, they must be listeners to this show because we've been you were pining, we were kind of pining for it. I don't know how much of that was tongue in cheek back in July, but definitely not so much in 6, 8 weeks ago whenever we talked last, man. I mean, this is just like the path that we've at least walked with you on this show has been so fascinating because preseason, we were talking expectations, and at the time it was, hey, get to a bowl game, show some progress as a program to know that we're heading in the right direction and we can feel confident for the future of Indiana football. And then our conversation last time you were here about 2 months ago, midseason, was all right, well, where are these goalposts moving to? Because we've already crushed all of these goals out of the park. And if you told any Indiana fans preseason, hey, you're going to be in the first college playoff ranking and you'll finish 10-2, I guarantee you they all would have taken that preseason. But when you start 6-0, if you fizzle out, surely there's going to be a bitter taste in the mouth. And fortunately, we don't have to sit here and have that conversation today, Sammy, because for the first time in program history, they're 11-1. They're going to the college football playoff. They're playing in the very first 12-team college football playoff game. Just what's been just the vibe around the fan base now that it's happened. They've got there. And not only that they've gotten there, but they've re-upped Cignetti to a new contract, and it seems like they're going all in on this guy. They're going and all in on football at Indiana.
Yeah, and it's definitely different. Indiana's basketball school, but their basketball team stinks. So they're real lucky that football's had the year that they've had. But I think, and I've said it before on our podcast with Hoosier Huddle, eh, football is where everything's at. It
Mhm.
makes your athletic department go, and I think Indiana finally realized that. Um, when they brought in Curt Cignetti, and they gave him whatever he needed, and then with the new contract, um, the assistant pool, his pay, all that stuff, and there's more to come. I think they're going to try and redo the press box and things like that. But it is now. Football is that they care, and part of me is like, great, this is awesome. They're 11-1. We're in the college football playoff, and then some of me is like, guys, we've been talking about this for over a decade now. If you just put a little bit of effort into football, who knows where it'll go. And now, yeah, if this was still a 14 playoff, you're not making the playoff, but um, you came in tied for second in the Big Ten. Some stupid tiebreaker kept you out of the Big Ten championship game, but you finished ahead of Ohio State. You beat Michigan. You win both trophy games. I mean, you beat the snot out of Purdue. You're a missed field goal away from 69-0, which
Mhm.
would have been awesome.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, it's just been one of those. I want to say I told you so. Like, listen, this is what happens when you invest in
Mhm.
football.
Mhm.
But it's also been, far and away, they blew by expectations. There was always, and we talked about in July, there was always a kind of unknown. And I think going forward, there's always going to be an unknown
Mhm.
especially with the portal. You,
Yep.
you don't know what you have until you hit the field. And you saw there are a handful of teams on IU's schedule like that. Northwestern, UCLA, Maryland, even Michigan to an extent. You kind of didn't know. Washington had a new coach coming in. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can imagine because I'm living it too, which is nice. And here our paths cross. I want to ask one more big picture question though, and I don't want to get too bogged down on this because I think there's going to be a fascinating conversation to have on this at some point in the off season. But I mean, we've seen how the fan base has embraced Curt Cignetti, but how have the decision makers, the power brokers within the Indiana, the community, the university, the athletics department embraced him? Because he comes in and there was a lot of bluster. And I mean, he was getting some flack for it the week of the Ohio State game because Ohio State fans are sensitive. They're like, oh my God, he says we suck, went to pep rally, blah, blah, blah. But like,
Well, at
it
least they
almost,
didn't introduce a bill to make it a felony to say Ohio
oh my
State
gosh,
sucks.
I was giving Clinton shit for that on our last episode about that. But like, it seemed like initially it's almost like he was trying to pull Indiana kicking and screaming behind him, saying, "Look, man, we're gonna do this my way, and if we do it my way, we're gonna have success." And now, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. We've seen it. He has a proof of concept of this now. How have the people who make the decisions at the university kind of rallied behind this kind of cult of personality that he's been?
Yeah, I mean, when Curt Cignetti came in, he said this publicly that he wanted to see if this fan base was actually dead. You're coming off of 9 wins in 3 years, and Tom Allen's magic ran out, and people were making fun of LEO and all that stuff. He wanted to see, is this fan base dead, or is this one just, man, we just need to get the AD out and get the pulse right. And he said what he said, and he needed to say it, and he's been very brash and open about it. And then I think the week before the Ohio State game, he called IU the emerging superpower in college football and things like that. So here's where it gets interesting with the power brokers at IU, and I'm going to go down the basketball rabbit hole here. So Mike Woodson was hired. A lot of it is by Quinn Buckner, who's the president of the board of trustees. Scott Dolson apparently was not involved in that, and Dolson is the athletic director. Was not involved in making that decision, and it was overlooked. Now he has, listen, let me make the next basketball hire, or let me decide Mike Woodson's fate because I knocked it out of the park with football. I know what I'm doing. Let me do it. We can fix this thing. So I think it gives everybody a sense of credibility on they made the right hire. They've done it the right way. And, they're putting football in the forefront. Now, with regards to university, you've heard it a million times before. Athletics is the front stoop of a university. IU's had commercials with football. You've had college game day there. You've had big new kickoff and all those things. So it's only a good thing, for them. Now, does it get college presidents? I don't know how long their shelf lives are. But maybe it gives Pam Whitten a little bit more ammo to stay at IU for a little bit longer too. But yeah, they've got to be licking their chops. And hey, we sold out the Final Four games. We're selling season tickets now. So it's banked power, especially for the athletic director.
Yeah, this is a separate rabbit hole, so I'll try not to turn us off too far here. But someone mentioned at one point that just looking at like the impact that Nick Saban had on the University of Alabama, not the football program, just the university and the visibility he brought and what that meant for the university. I don't remember the exact financial implications of it, but it was massive. And I mean, that goes to your point that if your football team is good, it gets people paying attention to you, and you get people paying attention to you. They want to come to your school. You get more out of state students, and it just raises that overall profile of the school.
Yeah, and all those, and I hate how they do college rankings, but it's like the more people apply, the more you can reject, and that gives your, we can reject more people and acceptance rates and all that stuff. So, yeah, and then it's great for the town of Bloomington. Businesses are booming down there. I don't know the exact numbers, but you look at hotels, there's only 700 hotel rooms in Bloomington. It's a tiny town. But now that you have a good football team and you might expand the stadium and things like that, you might get more hotels in Bloomington or more Airbnbs.
Mhm.
It's just, yeah, some people might be upset with the way things are changing, and I get it, but it's good for Bloomington. Getting more
Mhm.
tax dollars and getting more money in there and more students, it's an overall plus for the town.
Mhm. Now, this game as a whole, I'm affectionately referring to it as the they haven't played anyone bowl because that seems to be it was a conversation with Indiana for a minute, and then, the attention span of the college football watching community as a whole can only handle one story at a time, and it went from oh my god, Indiana's schedule is terrible to which SEC team is going to be 3 losses playing in there. But in this overall like discourse on schedules this year, Notre Dame's kind of fallen under the radar, and anyone who listens to our show has heard me in the preseason say this is a schedule that Notre Dame can't afford to go worse than 11-1 on because it's bad. They haven't played a good team. I mean, they played a couple good teams, but if you look at the overall strength of schedule rankings for both teams, they're not great, but any advanced stats you look at, the EPA adjusted for opponents, these are still two outstanding football teams. They're two teams that, like, if you look at their overall body of work, they pretty closely mirror each other in the sense that they had a couple of low scoring games that were a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Indiana's loss obviously being of the significantly less embarrassing variety than Notre Dame's. But in really the 10 other games, they just beat the crap out of everyone that they played. Like if you look at the average, I think the game control rating on ESPN, they're 1 and 2 in the country. So when you're looking at this game, how do you see the Hoosiers matching up against the Irish, just overall from a talent and a schematic point of view?
Yeah, one thing on schedules first because I was outspoken on social media about it. The SEC plays 8 conference games,
Hmm.
and when the Big Ten moved to 9 conference games, I think in 2014, I asked Kevin Wilson this: Is it a good thing for the Big Ten? He said, No, it's a terrible thing for the Big Ten, because instead of going at the time 12-2 or 13
Hmm.
and one against your non-conference schedule, you're guaranteed to go 7-7,
Hmm.
or in this case, you're guaranteed to go 9-9. So everybody's guaranteed an extra loss. While these SEC teams, sure, some of those SECs teams have the flexibility to play a Clemson or to play USC and lose out in Vegas.
Hmm.
Um, but they pump up those schedules with another win, and
Hmm.
so instead of a 7-5 team, you have an 8-4 team, and it just looks better. Um,
Yep.
for IU, I've always been, an advocate for get your 3 wins in the non-conference and go from there.
Hmm.
Because look, if IU scheduled, let's say, I don't know, Duke or somebody like that and lost and went 10-2, they're not making the playoff.
Hmm.
They're not making the playoff with 2 losses. There was debate they barely made it with 1 loss to the number 2 team in the country on the road in a game where he gave them 2 touchdowns at
Hmm.
least. So both of these teams, look, the loss to NIU probably should have kept Notre Dame out, but the SEC was so mid this year that it didn't matter. Um, but they're Notre Dame reminds me of Michigan a little bit, except Notre
Hmm.
Dame has a better quarterback
Hmm.
and a better running game. But their defense is great. They're stout. Their red zone defense is unbelievable, and that's where they kind of are mirror images of each other in terms that they're reversed. Indiana ranks, I think, in the top 3 in red zone offense.
Hmm.
They scored 98% of the time. They've scored 59 touchdowns in the red zone as well. And Notre Dame's given up like 30 red zone trips in total. So that's what, to me, this game is going to come down to. Can IU get the ball to the red zone, and can they score touchdowns? But yeah, you have they're both defensive heavy. But again, it's Notre Dame has that talent. They have the Howard Cross the third. They have Jeremiah Love, and they have Riley Leonard as well. So you have the star power at Notre Dame, and here comes little old Indiana with Curtis Rourke, King of the MAC, and the G5 All Stars coming into South Bend, Indiana. Um, yeah, it's this kind of sums up what the season was for Indiana. Can they come in and traditionally Notre Dame's awesome. Traditionally, Indiana's at the bottom of the Big Ten, and they came in with a non-traditional coach who's not an IU guy, who brought in all these transfers from the G5 level with chips on their shoulder, and turned them into an 11-1 juggernaut who absolutely destroyed everybody
Mm-hmm.
except for Ohio State, Michigan.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about that Ohio State game because I don't really agree with a lot of the national discourse that has been on it, and and that was part of like people are afraid like college football fans hate a Cinderella, and it makes no sense to me because of how much that's embraced in the NCAA tournament. But Indiana really didn't play that poorly against Ohio State, and you touched on it just now. Like it's 7-0, and the punter drops the ball, and you give up a 7-yard drive. You give up a punt return touchdown, and you get the onside. You try the onside kick at the end of the game, and you're rushing the line of scrimmage to try to force a quick 3-and-out, and a really good running back breaks a run on you, and all of a sudden that's 21 points in a game that was what 31-15 or something like that. So that's,
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean, most of
15
them.
point game.
That's most of the margin right there. But looking at that game as a whole, I think the interesting takeaway from it, and that's coming on the heels of the Michigan game too, is after that first drive of the game, the way that Jim Knowles attacked the Indiana offensive line, they had a ton of success with that. And I would say on a scale of 1 to Jim Knowles, Al Golden's probably only about an 8 in his blitz happiness, but that's that's definitely something that I can see, like with the way that they use their linebackers or even their safeties, that Notre Dame might try to attack Indiana in a similar way. How do what the staff was able to do from what you think they're able to do from a self scouting point of view, from what went wrong in that game? How do you envision they might try to tinker the offensive game plan to counteract something similar to what Jim Knowles and Ohio State were able to do successfully against them?
Vary the snap count.
Mhm.
IU had to go to a silent snap count at Ohio State. That place was loud. I don't think, look, Notre Dame's loud, but it's not going to be
Yeah. Mhm.
106,000 people
Mhm.
loud. The stadium's set up differently and all that stuff. So IU had to go to that silent snap count, and it was kind of, I mean, once you snap it a few times, it's kind of obvious to figure out, especially now that you have all these tablets on the sideline and you can watch video.
Mhm.
The guard hits the center on the butt. Second later, the ball snapped. So what are you going to do as a defense? Well, I see the guard hit the center on the butt. It's time to
Here
go,
we
and
go.
that's what happened. It looked like Ohio State timed up the snap count. IU didn't do a variance on it, and it just, man, after that first drive, it was almost like there was no offensive line. As soon as the defense ball was snapped, defender was in Curtis Rourke's lap. IU also had some drop passes, and then like, yeah, they played better than a lot of the national pundits think, but IU played their worst game that they played all year. Um, Punter snaps the ball, then that turns a 7-7 game that should be 7-7 going into halftime into a 14-7 game. Coming out of halftime, IU gets the ball, goes 3-and-out, punts it to the wrong side of the field. They return it for a touchdown. So it's over. You're not coming back against Ohio State on the road like that. And it became the question of, can you keep it close enough to stay in the playoff race? And I get it. It's the only ranked team that IU played, and they did not play well. They didn't. They looked like they were overwhelmed by the moment, overwhelmed by the noise. But can they, just like all the other little bits of adversity through the season, can they bounce back? And now it's your next test. Can they handle the spotlight of all the noise, not just the crowd noise, but all the noise surrounding a playoff game
Mhm.
against Notre Dame?
Yeah, and that's a fascinating aspect to this matchup is because it's kind of one of those like, hey, you got you got the stinker out of the way. You played the big team. It didn't go the way that you wanted. All right, now we know what we did wrong. We know what we have to do better. But this is just such a novel environment for everyone involved in this game. And I think like the advantage for this kind of has to go Indiana's way because even though it's his first year there, Curt Cignetti has experience participating and preparing for playoff style football at the FCS level. What, if any, advantage do you think that can give Indiana in this game in terms of preparation?
I don't know if it would give them an advantage in this game, but definitely moving forward. Like if IU were to win against Notre Dame, he knows how to prepare for multiple opponents. At the same time, I'm sure he has whatever grad assistants or an analyst breaking down Georgia. But yeah, it's kind of like the NCAA tournament, like that, where okay, we're potentially playing this team next. We have to have that scout ready to go to. I don't know. I don't know if it pays. It doesn't show up as much in the first round because it's the first round. It's just like any other postseason game that has been played, any bowl game. You've got a couple weeks to prepare. Can you keep your team focused? Can you? I mean, the transfer portal thing's a mess right now too. But can you keep your team focused? Can you compartmentalize between portal recruiting, game breakdown, and all that stuff? And I think Cignetti can, but I also think Marcus Freeman probably can too. So we'll see. But I think that advantage plays out further down the road should IU make it further down the road.
Heading into this playoff, there was a lot of discussion about the weather, and it was centered around, those southern teams coming up north. And it seems like that's dropped now since we have two cold weather teams in this one. And then, SMU going to Penn State, that's a whole other can of worms. And they're playing one game in Texas, and Knoxville and Columbus, the weather isn't really that far off. But looking at this,
it's debatable. If it ices in Knoxville and Nashville and Tennessee, the whole state shuts down for a week. So it gets that cold, but they don't know how to handle it.
That's true.
I've heard that argument before.
You saw the Tennessee players. I don't remember what game they were playing. It was like 55 degrees, and they're all huddled around the heater. I'm like, man, if you guys are on the road for the first round, you're in for a rude awakening because you're going to be playing somewhere cold. But in this one, we talked a little bit about it pre-show. There's a chance of snow, but maybe earlier in the day, so that's probably not going to impact the game as much. Potentially windy though during game time, not like exorbitantly so, but looking at the two offenses in this game, Indiana relies on the downfield pass a lot more than Notre Dame does, and that's more so because Notre Dame's not very good at it. But if there's a situation where conditions impact the ability of Indiana to throw the ball downfield, if they have to rely more on the run or more on a short pass game, how do you envision them kind of pivoting? Or just in general, even if we're not talking about weather, in general, how do you envision them trying to attack this Notre Dame defense?
I think they try to establish the run. The IU's been good doing that, and then using those RPOs, so they call it pass run options. The PROs as well off of that. Notre Dame will probably play man, it looks like. And so you run your man beater defense, and it all starts up front on the offensive line. If you can block and give Curtis Rourke time, IU's receivers are probably better athletes than Notre Dame's secondary. Now, Notre Dame has a good secondary, but they're responding to what IU's receivers are doing, especially if it's a slick track. IU has already played a snow game against Purdue. Now I get it. It's Purdue, and nothing you can't really take away much other than that IU kicked their butts. But they played in that weather. It's not going to be shocking. And if it's a slippery track, they'll be fine. It actually might hurt IU in terms of slowing them down, but they should be okay going there. What hurts is if it's windy and they want to take their shots downfield. You saw it against Purdue. You saw it against Maryland earlier in the year. I don't know how the wind works at Notre Dame Stadium. Each stadium's different. But in Memorial Stadium, the throws get impacted by the wind, especially if they're long, high, deep balls that kind of get above the stands a little bit. The wind swirls in there, and you've seen several overthrows and several underthrows. Depends which way you're going into the wind. But yeah, Indiana wants a better weather game. I don't think the weather is going to be good. Also, it's Indiana, and it could change.
Mm-hmm.
The game's in 3 days, 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
The forecast could change. But
Yeah,
if it's a snowy, bad weather game, Notre Dame's running offense is built for that.
yeah, and that's kind of how I wanted to pivot next. Is I mean, this defense for Indiana's been really good all year, even against Ohio State, and they seem to play a lot of zone in that game, reluctant to match up man to man against Ohio State's athletes out wide, which understandable. That's the best that they're going to see this year, and they're not going to see anything even close to that, at least out wide in this game. So the question I had for you on this is, with Notre Dame's strength being the run, do you envision Indiana still trying to go more zone, especially given that this very much seems like a Riley Leonard's going to run the ball 18 times type of game? But on the other side of that coin, knowing that, you have guys at the cornerback and safety position who can lock down Notre Dame's receivers in man, or is it kind of just a, mix and match and let's see what happens early and then adjust from there?
It might be let's see what happens early and adjust from there, but that early start might be putting a guy like Jalen Walker as a spy on Riley Leonard. Jalen Walker's an athletic linebacker. He had a great game against Purdue. I think he had 4 tackles for a loss, an interception, forced fumble. Basically filled up the stat sheet like he was playing NCAA 25 on varsity, which is the level of opponent Purdue is. I'm not going to apologize for taking shots at those guys.
Oh no, they were not good this year, man. They were so bad.
They were pretty bad. But yeah, it's you're going to put a spy on, and maybe you see, instead of Terry Jones at that rover position, you see a third linebacker like Isaiah Jones. But I mean, Terry Jones has been playing well too. So yeah, I think you start off with a spy on. They start off with a spy on Leonard, and then if the Notre Dame wide receivers start eating you up, you can see them adjust. But I think they go man. You have D'Angelo Pons. Jameer Johnson should be back. He missed the Purdue game, but he should be back as well. And then you have Amari Farrell at safety, and a couple other safeties who can play too. So, but the big matchup is what they do with Jalen Walker and Riley Leonard.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking at this game, I'm not going to ask you for a score prediction or anything like that, but looking at the key matchups in this game, how these teams match up together, what would you quantify as 3 keys that need to go Indiana's way for the Hoosiers to come out victorious on Friday?
Number 1 is red zone success. You got to score touchdowns in the red zone. Notre Dame doesn't give up many red zone trips, and when they do get to the red zone, they don't give up many touchdowns. Obviously, it's dummy math. 7 is better than 3.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're just a bunch of PE teachers and not math majors, but that one's a layup for us. 7's better than 3. Number 2 is takeaways. Notre Dame, I think, had a plus 28 turnover margin, or they had 28 takeaways on the year, 17 interceptions, 11 fumble recoveries. Indiana's got to take care of the ball. You cannot give this offense free drives and chance to, 1, run the clock, 2, put more points on the board. That won't be good. That's where the weather comes in too. Is it going to be icy, snowy, wet, rainy, whatever? Indiana's got to take care of the ball. Number 3, special teams. Notre Dame, I believe, has blocked 6 kicks this year.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to come after the punter, James Evans, who on that play dropped the ball, took his eye off of it, which is PE 101 not to do. But it looked like they were trying to shift protection there, and had he caught it, that punt's probably getting blocked anyway. Can they keep those major special teams plays out of it, to where you give Notre Dame the ball at your side, inside your 40 to start drives? It's not going to go well. Those are the 3 keys.
Yeah, another side of that coin too on the special teams battles. I don't think Notre Dame kicker Spencer Schrader, that was last year. Mitch Jeter has not made a field goal in like 2.5 months. He had a groin injury, and he's just been awful since he came back. And they were putting videos out of him shanking kicks, and I'm like, that's great. please don't come down to a game-winning field goal. And then
or
other side.
please do.
Listen, you watch your mouth there, sir. Other side of that coin. Last question for you, Sammy, is: are there any matchups that you look at that worry you that could play out the opposite direction for IU and end up leading to a Notre Dame win in this one?
Yeah, it's Jeremiah Love and that running
Ugh.
game against the
Mm-hmm.
defense, man. He his numbers, he didn't have the numbers to get in the Heisman conversation, totally, but he should have been. He split carries with the other running back there at Notre Dame, but man, can he play? And he's a threat in the passing game too. I think he has over 20 receptions, 200 receiving yards, and then you have Riley Leonard, who I've watched the last couple Notre Dame games. I watched Texas A&M. I'm currently watching Purdue, but
I'm so sorry.
it's fine. It's on CBS, so I like it. But it's every time the pocket kind of collapses around him, and you might have a chance of taking him down. It gets to the outside, finds a hole. I mean, his vision as a running quarterback is unbelievable. There were plays where the hole opens up right, almost perpendicular to the left, and he sees it, runs right through it. Now, again, it's Purdue, but that vision is uncanny for a quarterback. That's running back vision, and a quarterback, he's big, and yeah, that running game is going to be tough. But I don't think that their running back talent is as far off as Notre Dame's or as Ohio State's.
I'd agree. Yeah.
Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
Will Howard's not as good as a runner as Riley Leonard, but IU shut down
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State's running game. Now Notre Dame's offensive line is probably better than Ohio State's, but you look at it and you say, well, the running back talent and the skill talent is very similar. Notre Dame might be a little bit better, but if you're picking a team, any four of those running backs are going to do. As your first pick. So that kind of gives you a little bit of hope on IU's defense. Hey, we've shut down people's running games. We've shut down good running games, like Ohio State's as well on the road. And, that's what they have to do is not miss tackles. They've been pretty good tackling all year. As defensive coordinator Brian Haynes says, not going to be able to stop Riley Leonard running, but he's going to have to pay the toll to go on the road. So if he wants to run the ball 20 times, that's 20 hits he's going to take.
Yep. Give him a lick each time. Well, Sammy, I thank you once again for joining me this evening. No Clinton this time. This game's so bittersweet because I'm fired up about the matchup. I think it's going to be an incredible game, but I very much wanted it to be in the final and not in the first round. So I'm sad to be on the opposite end of this one from you, but hopefully we get a classic game on Friday night.
Yeah, you're calling it We Played Nobody Bowl. It's the reversible jacket bowl for me.
I've seen the. Oh man, this was the first time that I became aware of this. My dad was born in South Bend, and he's not a basketball guy, so he never brought any of this to my attention. And I learned the lore about this week, and I got a pretty good chuckle out of seeing some of those tweets about it.
Yeah, look, all those IU basketball fans are upset. They're going to be upset again if Notre Dame loses on Friday night. But it is what an opportunity to go up to South Bend. First Friday night game in South Bend since 1900, when they beat the Physicians and Surgeons of Chicago. That 5-0 in that tough matchup. Talking about the We Play Nobody Bowl.
Yeah, it's just like Mercer in November, man.
Yep. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited to go up there and take in the whole playoff atmosphere as well. So it'll be it's a history making Friday night first playoff game on campus. So it's going to be fun.
Yes, and the only event of the night, man, the college football world will be watching. Well, thank you again, Sammy, for joining us this evening. Hope you have a blast on Friday, and maybe I'll see you at the game.
Yeah, definitely. I'll shoot you my number, and yeah, thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Yeah, please do. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Break down the first half of this game with Sammy. We will be back with you in the 9 o'clock hour talking with Jack Sobel from the On3 Network, Blue and Gold Illustrated, to break down the Notre Dame half of this game. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks.
See ya.
There we go. Maybe. Something went wrong. Refresh the page.
Uh-oh.
I think everyone is still being recorded. Try refreshing the page. Okay, let me try this real quick. Reload. Oh, let's try this again. All right, there we go.
Awesome. Well, yeah,